This morning, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a rare 6-3 ruling, struck down most of Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs, finding that he had no constitutional authority to impose them unilaterally under an emergency powers law, and that only Congress has that taxing power. The tariffs were invalidated because the Emergency Economic Powers Act doesn't grant tariff authority, and only Congress can set taxes and duties. In other words, the court reminded the president that he is not above the law, a constitutional truth that the framers of the Constitution built into the separation of powers, for which we are celebrating its 250th anniversary this year. Now, many are reacting with either joy or outrage. Yet, our goal as emerging leaders is maturity rather than mania. Today's moment invites deeper questions. Before you and I gang tackle Donald Trump, ask instead, Lord, is it I? Lord, is it I? That's exactly what the disciples asked Jesus in Matthew 26:22 when confronted with their own potential betrayal of him. Not, is it him, but is it I? This is the leadership question that every aspiring leader must ask when faced with conflict. Not just political conflict, but internal conflict as well. When we fixate on external figures, personalities, policies, or presidents, we often miss the mirror sitting across from us that is the real test. Because if we look inside, we'll discover a little bit of Trumpism in us, not the political views, but the ego patterns. A desire to have our own way. The tendency to justify our actions first. Or a subtle belief that accountability doesn't apply to us. This is the problem, not Donald Trump per se, not the tariffs, not the politics, but unmanaged ego, both inflated and deflated. So as emerging leaders, we must do three things. T, target the problem. Name it, egoholism, that mix of unchecked pride and insecurity. O, own the problem, not they, not him, but me. And P, proceed to action. Invite feedback, correct course, practice humility, and build accountability systems. Today, the Supreme Court reminded a president that he must work within shared systems of power. But you and I must remind ourselves that leadership begins with self-mastery. Again, before we gang tackle others, we need to pause, reflect, and then ask, Lord, is it I? Why? Because that's where real leadership begins. And thank you for joining me for this special breaking news edition of Tim Alston's Leadership Nuggets and the 10 Commandments of Leadership podcast. We'll see you this afternoon at 4 p.m. Central Time, available on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. See you then, and invite a friend. Bye-bye.